starting off.
Okay, you can see I can't resist. Are you seeing just one image?
No.
No, so lots.
Well, what's going on here?
You want to go to full screen if you can.
Yeah, we see your next slide too, John.
And then all your slides down at the bottom.
587. We're gonna be here a while.
Yeah.
No, no, not.
Well, use slideshow up at the top left, John. Yep, right there. Just to the right of that. Up a little more.
Up top.
To the right now.
The
The right one. Next one to the right.
Right.
That's it. Try that.
Ah,
There, guys.
thank you.
Good job.
It takes a village. It takes a village.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna review because I have something new to report. I've talked about the Valkyries before, and this is the dynamic duo. Burton, the most Veronica Burton, most improved player. Nakasi in her first year, coach of the year. But what I wanted to point out is Caitlin Chin. I spent quite a bit of time talking about her last time. Immigrant from Taiwan, Princeton, Ivy League Player of the Year, a scholar, majored in medical anthropology. So I'm very interested in her. She had an extra year, and the most celebrated coach in college women's basketball recruited her for her extra COVID year, and she led them to a March Madness championship. Really takes care of the ball. The assist to turnover ratio is very high. So what happened this week? She had a breakout game, not wanting to disappoint us. And in one game, she scored a career high 15 points. But in the plus minus category for us basketball fans, she was plus 26, which meant while she was on the floor, the Valkyries outscored the other team by 26 points. That's pretty good, and that earned her post game interview with the press. So happy about that. And so her coach called her the Energizer Bunny. And if you watch her play, you get that feeling. Okay, so enough of the short subjects. How do we celebrate the 250th? And so last week we talked about the American Revolution and as a whole, and Ken Burns' contention that it was the most consequential in history. That it was a republic. It did not. It resisted a dictatorship, which is where most revolutions end. And we asked Chat GPT for their opinion, and they taught us that what was unusual was a unique combination of durability of the revolution, a written constitution, uh, and survival. Yeah, as part of durability. And it formed a new sovereign state and was a model for later revolutions, as we talked about last week. Uh, but the big thing was the power from the consent of the government. That's almost cliche for us, but it truly was the most enduring example of how a nation could be governed with the consent of the governed. Um, so the concept of a citizen, the term had been used in ancient cultures, but the citizen was usually in the context of the majority of the population being slaves. Uh, so a lasting constitutional republic turned the world upside down, as the saying went. Um, so now that with that background and context, we turn to George Washington, the indispensable leader. Um, he, he, for those of you that are watching the Doris Kearns Goodwin series on Prime, you'll see that it's complicated. And you see his whole background going back to the 1750s when he's sent out just barely out of his teens to go and figure out what the French are doing over the Appalachian Mountains in the Ohio Valley. So um, uh, Tom, you want to give the group your review of the TV series?
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Tom. I haven't watched the George Washington one, but I've watched the Teddy Roosevelt one. It's quite fascinating, and I haven't finished it. I'm up to where he ended his first term as president. So there could be a lot of comparisons for what happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to what's going on today. It's sort of a flip-flop situation. It's sort of like Teddy Roosevelt was a good guy. The administration today are the bad guys. So Teddy Roosevelt, he did a lot of things for, let's say, the average citizen, the poorer citizens, and he struck out. He went against the rich people of the day. So it's quite a fascinating story of Teddy Roosevelt. Really fascinating. So whoever made the recommendation to watch that series, I thank you.
Yeah, and there are echoes of Roosevelt in Trump's bluster and manner, but little else. Aiko and I finished the Doris Kearns Goodwin series last night, and we'll repeat our recommendation.
So, hey, John. So, like, I know Doris is in the Teddy Roosevelt one. Is she in the George Washington one too?
Yeah, she's not in it, but she produced it and brought together a group of historians that specialized in Washington. So yeah, it's pretty
And so, how many are in her series?
three.
What's the third one?
Well, it's the end of the war, the Revolutionary War. Um, so the first one is George Washington's early years. This is a biography. It says early years, and the middle is him getting involved in the independence movement, and the third one is him completing the Revolutionary War. And I also mentioned the Ron Chernow biography of Washington, which he did 6 years after he did Hamilton. And he did Washington because in focusing on Hamilton, Washington just keeps intruding into the story. And once he was done with Hamilton, he said, I've got a good start on Washington. And I think he's doing as good a job. He writes history very well. So I'm
Well,
about.
Doris appears in the Teddy Roosevelt documentary.
Uh-huh.
She's one of the historians.
Yeah, she doesn't appear in the Washington one, but she produced it and gathered the historians who knew more about Washington than she did. So anyway, there's a couple of resources. All right, so here she is. Each episode is 90 minutes, three episodes. And Ron Chernow, he got the Pulitzer for Washington. And uh, as I point out, it's a long book, but if you want to just focus, and I recommend you just focus on the war, you'll get enough hints and flashbacks. But if you start at page 180 and stop at 460, Yorktown, 180 is Lexington, Washington, I say relative obscurity. He's pretty well known for his military actions by military people, but he isn't generally known. At the Continental Congresses, he's known because everybody there is involved in politics and military affairs in each of their respective states. But so you can safely start at 180 and end at 460, just to get through July 4th. I want us to feel on July 4th that we actually have something to celebrate. And the way it's coming down is there's so much conflict that we're not keeping our eye on the ball. And I think we do have something to celebrate. Anyway, other historians have said that Chernow's book on Washington is the best, most comprehensive, most balanced book ever written about Washington.
One that I liked, John, I read many years ago was by Flexner, and it was entitled Washington, the Indispensable Man, which you've been referring to him as.
Yeah, and Flexner's mentioned by Chernow quite frequently, so I think he's taken the best of Flexner.
The thing that I'm really surprised with is how young Washington was. He was like 22 years old. How many 22-year-olds do you know who can lead an army, train them, and then go to battle a revolutionary war against the country that was the strongest country around at the time? And were everybody else like Hamilton, were they all that young?
Well, Washington at the beginning, at the time of Lexington, the beginning of the war, was in his 40s, which is still young.
I thought he was 22 in the movie.
No,
That's when he was young at the French Indian War.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that was when he was young.
okay.
But at the beginning of the war, the Marquis Lafayette was 19. So that was really astounding how young he was. And Hamilton, I think was in maybe his late 20s. So they were all young relative to the Brits who they were fighting. For sure, they had youth on their side, which was a plus, but also a minus. And and you'll see in the early days of the war, Washington is not infallible, not at all, as we're about to see.
You see pictures of him like that last picture. I mean, he's got white hair and all that, and you think you think he's an older, much older person, but
Well, I never have been able to
He
understand.
was born in 1732.
oh,
Yeah, so that puts him in his 40s. I think it's the habit of wearing white wigs that
Oh,
uh,
that's true.
I don't quite understand, but I think that adds that misperception.
Isn't that from the British, John? That they would wear wigs.
Is it what?
The British Parliament, they
Yeah,
wear wigs.
yeah. Yeah, and you would see if you watch the Doris Kearns Goodwin mini series that they're all wearing wigs. Um, okay, so uh, I've got to say I've been in contact with one of my housemates um, from Stanford, David Kennedy, who, by the way, got a Pulitzer Prize for Freedom from Fear, which is a two-part documentation of the Depression and World War II. Uh, and he panned Ken Burns. He thought there was too much military history, that the revolution was complicated ideas, politics, diplomacy, and he thought Burns did not do a good job on that. I need to give balanced opinions here. I just don't agree. I thought that Burns was giving the revolution from the bottom up, and it was as much a social history as anything. He wanted to make it real, and I thought he did. Um, so if you prefer images, and some of us do, I ran across an interesting 20-minute YouTube animation of outlining the path that Washington took, the flow of battles. Um, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Um, so, what was Washington's strategy? Well, going into it, he really didn't have a strategy, but he tumbled to the Fabian strategy, which is a fancy word for ancient military doctrine for a poorer army fighting a richer army. And the idea avoids to avoid decisive pitched battle, favoring attrition and continuous retreat. So you make the enemy chase you, and you wait for him to make a mistake. You just harass him. And this was first deployed by Fabius, who's got other names, but let's just settle for Fabius. And he wore down Hannibal, who was vulnerable, even with all his elephants, with an overstretched supply line that initially went over the Alps. Um, and Fabian just wore Hannibal down until Hannibal just gave up and went home. Um, Chernow, if you read it, you'll see how George Washington tumbled to it by necessity. Uh, he was known for his caution, but they also pointed out, Chernow did, that he had a reckless streak. And so Congress uh, uh, paid attention to that reputation of a reckless streak. And they said that Washington had to submit all his decisions. They were really proposals that he had to submit to a council of war. So here's Congress already putting a check on power. And this war by committee initially made the American strategy very conservative. Just for an example, the very first thing that Washington wanted to do, remember, all the action was in Boston, and the British now had a large fleet in Boston, and his Washington's idea was to float amphibious rafts across the Back Bay. So those of you that know Boston can visualize that. And surprise the British off guard. So he had to present that to his war council of 8 generals, and they dinged it. And the opposition was led by Nathaniel Greene. He thought it was too risky, the tide going in and out. But the Washington then, his idea was vetoed, and this is memorialized in this relief of all the actors that were there at the time. Washington had one quality that disturbed Abigail Adams. She said, Washington can appear to agree with you and accommodate you, yet go ahead and do what he really wanted to do. And that would be very dangerous in someone that was less benign than Washington. But anyway, the Washington had to accommodate himself to being overruled, not something he'd ever had to do when fighting as a British colonel. So the big success in Boston that made Washington feel overconfident, this is my thesis, was to pull cannons up on top of Dorchester Heights. Now, Homer, you've lived in Boston, right?
Right.
All right. And so the Dorchester Heights overlooking Boston in that day, all the British ships were there. But where did he get these cannons?
That's where Henry Knox comes in.
Yeah, that's where Henry Knox comes in. So he has the command of the harbor. He has these cannons up there, and the Brits, they decide, hey, we got to get out of here. He could blow up all our ships. So they left, and the citizens of Boston who'd been suffering under having to quarter all these British soldiers and sailors, they're very glad to see the Brits sail away. So Henry Knox, he's one of the main characters throughout the war. I've already mentioned Nathaniel Green, and I'm not going to mention many other people because these are they crop up again and again. And Washington's talent is to know and recognize capable assistants. But Henry Knox pulled 60 tons of munitions over 200 miles. That's a misprint. 200 miles all the way from Fort Ticonderoga. It was really epic to get all those munitions to Boston. And here's the pathway.
Looks like in the winter too.
Yeah, it was indeed. And so Henry Knox is interesting. He was a bookseller. He turned into a capable military commander, became the Army's chief of artillery, appropriately, and later became the first Secretary of War. You know, before then it became Secretary of Defense, and now it's Secretary of War again. Oh dear. So Fort Ticonderoga, Lake George, then you have to create sleds, go through Saratoga, Albany, and all the way over to Boston. So that made Washington overconfident. So he thinks he can duplicate that in New York City. He's pretty sure that the Brits are going to be sending ships to New York City. And in fact, those ships that were forced out of Boston did go to New York City. Now, we spent a lot of time when we did a couple of weeks on what if, and this was one of the what ifs, so I won't go into any detail. But Washington thought he could do from Brooklyn Heights what he had done from Dorchester Heights. But the Brits snuck in behind him on Long Island, and it was almost a debacle. He only gets away with it by his version of Dunkirk, getting private ships to move his men and munitions over to New York City in the middle of the night. And when the Brits wake up, he had kept fires burning all night long. And there'd been men up on Brooklyn Heights making noise to make the Brits think that he was still there and surrounded. But he escaped to New York City. So that was brilliant. That was brilliant. And his reputation lived just because he knew how to retreat and how to get out of a pinch, but he should have never been there in the first place. That was a grievous mistake. And that would have effectively ended the war if the Brits had prevailed.
How did he round up so many small boats to get those men out of there? Because if they weren't, big boats, they were small boats to take them out. There's a lot of men.
Well, remember, New York City was an international hub of commerce. The Dutch had been there for decades and decades, and they were very much a part of the British trade empire, which is why New York was one of the last states to go for independence. they were making a lot of money in the British Empire. So there were plenty of boats. And I suppose the real difficulty would have been to persuade businessmen to let Washington use their boats. New York City was a hub of loyalists just because of what I just said about being enmeshed in the British international trade. So I don't know. I think that would be interesting in and of itself to get more details. But there were enough patriots. So at that time, the vocabulary was loyalists versus patriots. And at that time, there were enough patriots who, by persuasion or coercion, there was a lot of coercion going on. And it often was ugly. So the patriots were able to pry loose some of these boats. And remember, these boats are used for commerce, so they're not little canoes. A lot of big rafts and barges, right? So they impressed them and used them and made their escape. So he makes another mistake. So they head up Manhattan, and this is actually north up here, and this is south. But they make it up Manhattan. They're pursued at Harlem Heights. They fight a battle and live to fight another day. And they've built a fort here, Fort Washington. So here's the Hudson. This is north. This is south. And so on the east side of the Hudson, they've built a Fort Washington. And on the west side, they've built a Fort Lee. And why have they built them? They are trying to shut off any Brits that come down from Canada, that come down from the north, and try to get to New York City. So with these two forts, they control the river, putting guns up on either side from the heights of Fort Washington and Fort Lee. For those of you that have been to the museum up here, I want to say the Cloisters. There's a wonderful museum here right now called the Cloisters, which I think the Rockefellers bought treasures from Europe that they purchased in the wake of World War I and World War II, when Europe was having garage sales. The Cloisters. But that was Fort Washington. And this is Fort Lee, which, interestingly enough, Washington names after one of his rivals. There were other people who wanted to head the Continental Army, and Charles Lee was one of them. And Washington kind of ingratiates himself to Lee by naming this Fort Lee. We're going to hear more about Charles Lee to see whether he was worthy of such an honor. He wasn't. So Fort Washington was a big mistake. not quite as bad as Brooklyn Heights, but it was indefensible. And Nathaniel Greene was one of his underlings that convinced Washington to make a stand at Fort Washington. Um, uh, uh, on the other side, the Hessians later conquered Fort Lee quite easily. So now, at that point, the Patriots no longer have a way of keeping the Brits from coming down the Hudson River. And so Nathaniel Greene, he's been heavily criticized, but he's going to make up for it big time. So
That's like that was closed off in 1776, so that's really at the beginning of the war, right? So
yeah,
the British had could keep going because it was 5 years before the war was over.
yeah. But upstream, they made another effort at West Point. At West Point, they put a chain across the Hudson River. And we saw when we were at West Point some of that chain that they keep as a monument to what was going on. Uh, and who was the fellow that Washington assigned to
Arnold,
monitor West Point? Yeah, Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold.
Yeah, but that's a few years later. So Fort Lee. Here is General Charles Lee, and at this time, with Washington's defeat at Brooklyn Heights, people were questioning Washington's judgment. And then the fall of Fort Washington, and Charles Lee was talking with Joseph Reed, who was Washington's aide de camp, who was the go-to guy that Washington turned to. And Lee and Joseph Reed were conspiring and criticizing Washington. And Lee thought Washington was insufficiently trained in military science, which was true. Lee had more training, formal training, but Washington had learned by doing in the French Indian War, particularly. And so this was later found out, and Reed eventually was replaced by Alexander Hamilton, as we're familiar with. So today, Fort Lee, they remember what they once were in the Revolutionary War. There's a bridge going across this place now from Fort Lee over to near the cloisters in Upper Manhattan. And it made the news. I remember, maybe you do too. This is Fort Lee downtown. And the bridge on a normal day. Here's the bridge on a terrible day. And it was all political vendetta that was going on between the mayor of Fort Lee and the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. And what was it over? The Bridgegate scandal revealed that Chris Christie had closed lanes as political retaliation against the mayor, who was failing to endorse Christie's reelection. So a little footnote. As I said, Nathaniel Greene was blamed for Fort Washington, and George Washington for not recognizing Greene's mistake. He is going to find redemption big time. Just a spoiler alert. So when Thomas Paine wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls," this was in the wake of Brooklyn defeats at Brooklyn Heights, Fort Lee, Fort Washington, and then Washington. Now the Brits are coming up Manhattan unimpeded, so he has to take his army south through New Jersey, an ignominious retreat. And then they go south across the Delaware River. And so that's on December 2nd. Washington spreads his army across the south bank of the river just to make sure that the Brits can't go unimpeded to Philadelphia, where Congress is still. So in addition to Charles Lee, there's Horatio Gates, who was another competitor with Washington to lead the troops. By the way, Washington presented himself to the First Congressional Congress in a military uniform. He was quite clear he was auditioning for the part. And both Horatio Gates and Charles Lee were jealous, and they were both restless at this particular time after Washington has failed so badly. After starting so promisingly in Boston. And neither one of these underlings were with Washington when he recrossed the Delaware on Christmas Eve. So it's December 2nd that puts him on the South Shore, but in the cover of darkness on Christmas Eve, he recrosses.
Well, John, would they have been expected to go across?
What's that?
Would they have been expected, Gates and Lee? Would they have been expected to go across with Washington? Did he?
Yeah. Yes, why not? And neither one of them were. And Horatio Gates pleaded illness because he didn't want to have his career ruined. He thought he had a good chance to replace Washington, so he wasn't going to put that at risk. So he just pleaded illness. He called in sick.
Okay.
And Charles Lee had been captured by the Brits in a bordello. You can't make this stuff up.
With his pants down.
Exactly. I have a slide. So that at this point, they officially, Washington and his underlings officially abandoned any bold offensive rules, and they go to this Fabian policy. So he didn't come into it as a Fabian, but he's of necessity he's a Fabian now, and this dangerous gambit across the Delaware is probably the last aggressive action he'll take for a long time.
It was funny that he would decide to become defensive after that success. That really rallied the cause.
It did. It did indeed, but they realized how lucky they were that gambit worked because it led to the successful battle of Trenton, and then the success followed quickly by the successful battle at Princeton. But Washington, he is really desperate. He knows that his reputation has taken a hit. He is increasingly aware when he has neither Gates nor Charles Lee with him that they're plotting. So he's at his wit's end, and it was the Delaware was a Hail Mary, and it worked. It worked. So that painting comes at a very critical time for Washington. He could be captured and executed. He was most dangerous at that particular moment. But
the thing is that wasn't that kind of like a real bad decision on the part of the British they were worried about their ships and they turn around and go, or what was it that miscalculation on their part?
well, that comes much later. That comes much later. Now they're riding high. They're overconfident. They're totally in New York for a couple of years. So Washington was truly desperate, but then he has the good sense to say, hey, let's not get in a jam like that. Let's avoid general actions. There'll be some exceptions, but let's avoid general actions against a large British force. And so he resolves that he wouldn't send young troops into open ground against superior forces. And that Washington was able to adjust at this moment it shows his capacity for growth. So as promised, here's Charles Lee in a bordello. It's hard to tell if his pants are totally off. And this is the British Army who's been tipped off that the Patriot general is upstairs. And so he eventually is released. I think it's a year later, but he is of such reputation that he is accepted back into Washington's war cabinet. But we're going to see later on that he's slow to obey orders. Being in a brothel, by the way, was against Washington's specific order. He had prohibited that, supposedly. So I'll just cut to the chase with Charles Lee, and so we can get him off the stage. A year later at Monmouth was the breaking point. Washington had tried to attack British forces retreating from New Jersey. Thank you. And Lee, for some reason, hesitated to attack the British as he'd been commanded to do, and in fact was retreating. And this is one of the few times that people saw Washington lose his temper. I mean, screaming, losing his temper. And he confronted Lee on the battlefield, the only time he did that, and said, I desire to know, sir, what is the reason for this disorder and confusion? And he took command, stabilized the army, and that day they fought to a draw. Lee, who had been reprimanded so openly, he demanded that he himself be court-martialed so he could clear his name. Not a good move. He was found guilty, and as you can imagine, and he was suspended from command for 1 year, but Lee didn't accept that, and he started a campaign in the press attacking Washington. So he'd been bad-mouthing him before, and he attacked Washington, but as Washington accumulated success after success, Lee was out of the picture completely, and Washington never spoke about him ever again. Okay, so this is the dictator of the Roman Republic who fought off Hannibal, Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus. Also known as the delayer, which was he delayed Hannibal by attacking his supply lines. So there's this is really guerrilla warfare. That's the instead of Fabianism. Guerrilla warfare is Fabian military strategy. There were other practitioners of Fabian strategy. The Russian general who fought off Napoleon. I don't know if he was the one that ordered Moscow to be burned so that Napoleon would have no food. Mao Zedong, famously, the Vietnamese general Giap, who fought against the French, and his strategy was used against the Americans, where he used the concept of selective escalation. And Nathaniel Greene. So how does Nathaniel Greene get his redemption? By fighting in the South. So as we talk about Washington, we're not going to talk much about his fighting in the South, with one notable exception, Yorktown. But it was Nathaniel Greene that softened up Cornwallis. And so I asked ChatGPT to create an imaginary roundtable and have a discussion in heaven between these practitioners of guerrilla warfare. I've thrown in Che Guevara. And I thought, I've come up, they supplied me with a script. So if anybody's interested in playing one of these characters at a round table in heaven discussing guerrilla warfare, let me know. If I have enough volunteers, I thought we'd do it for fun. So that's where we'll stop. So I will see who's here. Comments?
So this roundtable, will that be next Tuesday's session, or is this apart from that?
No, this would be part of next Tuesday's session. And if anybody volunteers, I'll send you the script from ChatGPT, and you have the right to refuse. Or you have the right to come up with a better script if you want to use your favored artificial intelligence.
This is Tom. In your presentation there, John, I think it's sort of interesting that even George Washington back in the day, he had to watch his back, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's sort of some of this stuff never goes away about people wanting to be power grabbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a given with Homo sapiens.
Yeah, I guess this been going on since the beginning of mankind.
Yeah, there's always been conspirators conniving to take over the throne. And you know, it's just not human beings. What's the name of the primatologist that he observed in primate communities? Always coalitions of power-hungry apes, simians, plotting, and they're waiting for any sign of weakness in the alpha male. And he talks about being with a particular troop, and maybe it was chimpanzees, and observing the troop. He was a little bit like Jane Goodall. He bonded with the alpha male, and you know, he noticed the alpha male had some signs of old age, and he was horrified to come in one morning and find the alpha male murdered by the beta males, who now one of them will ascend the throne. So, I mean, I don't know if you can say it's built into us genetically in the same way. I wouldn't make that claim, but I've always remembered his sadness at finding the dead alpha male. Yeah. Harold, you had something?
I'm reading a book about Alexander the Great, and he had some of the same issues as he got more and more of a megalomaniac and considered himself a god, and his troops were about to mutiny on him, but he died before they could.
And what did he die of? I've heard different theories.
They're not sure. It could have been acute alcohol poisoning, and it could have been some kind of a bug, typhoid, or who knows.
Yeah, when you conquer half the world, that's a vocational hazard.
It goes to your head, right?
Hey, John, but you know, thinking about your chimpanzee story, I think about the lions. You know, after a while, the male lion, you know, he sort of runs out of gas, and somebody comes in and takes over. You know, his time at being at the top of the heap is only 3 or 4 years or something like that, and then there's a new male lion or male lions that come in and take over.
Yeah.
And you know what else is sort of interesting about the lions? You ever seen I like to watch these animal shows. So sometimes the hyenas will attack the pride. And then the male lion will come storming in and grab one of the hyenas by the throat. and swing it around so all the other hyenas could see what the male lion is doing. And it sort of shows the other hyenas, I sure don't want to end up like that hyena, and they all leave. So it's
Yeah,
there's sort of some kind of animal instincts there or something.
yeah. for
And
sure.
I hate to say this, but you could translate that to Trump. He makes an example out of one or two senators, and what do all the other senators do? Oh, I better not end up like those two senators.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them are hyenas.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Well,
Very good. Thanks, John.
we'll continue Washington next week. It gets happier.
Yes, it does. Thank goodness.
Yeah. I won't be able to come next Tuesday,
Oh, Bruce.
John, but 'cause I'm going to be down at Dublin with radiology. So
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck, Bruce.
Yeah,
yeah,
Bruce, I'll give you a call later.
yeah, good deal.
All right. Bye bye.